All of a sudden, multiple American presidents seem to be confirming the existence of aliens and UFOs. Here's a viral clip of Barack Obama on a recent podcast.
I want to do a little bit of a lightning round here because it's not often I'll get access to the
Come on,
President
man.
of the United States. So, a couple questions here. Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
All right, I'm joined by CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, what do you think about all of these disclosures?
Yeah, it's interesting to have a president and a former president talking about this issue. This is not the first time that we've seen that, but this idea that these files are going to be released, obviously it's going to create a lot of fodder, a lot of discussion. This has long been a conversation. What's so interesting is that 10 years ago, this would have been considered fringe, right? Nobody would have, in any sort of serious matter, at least in my perspective, been talking from an executive level, especially about aliens and UFOs. And, nobody is definitively saying that aliens are real. They may believe that they are, but they are saying that people are experiencing something. They're seeing something. A lot of people are reporting seeing things in the sky that they cannot make sense of, right? That they don't know where the origin of these quote unquote aircrafts or images or what have you, what those actually are. So it's going to be interesting to see what the files show. But there's also a theological conversation that has to happen here, right? Because when secular culture starts to obsess about something and talk about it, and I think that's what we're seeing happen here, that the pressure is sort of pushing Trump and others into saying, hey, we need to do this. It then begs the church to say, well, what are you going to say about this? What is your answer going to be? And I think a lot of Christians have thought, well, this is silly. We don't need to think about it. We don't believe that's real. And they're just not engaging. And so I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're going to have some answers. And I'll let you speak here, but I have some other thoughts on the different theories that some even within the church have on what's actually happening.
Right. Well, let me read you what the President of the United States put out on social media, just so you can understand how mainstream this is. Quote, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs. That is from the President of the United States. It's also interesting that there's this new movie coming out with Steven Spielberg called The Disclosure. It seems, if you want to look at it this way, very coordinated. People would say maybe this is I heard someone saying this is a psyop to get people to stop paying attention to the Epstein files. Lots of theories going around. But theologically, I think this is important because do I think that, listen, if there are extraterrestrial, let's just call them normal organisms that have traveled, which would by necessity be light years, hundreds, thousands, millions of light years away, that means they would have had to travel for millions of years to get here, which to me doesn't seem plausible unless we are talking about an interdimensional being, which I do think makes sense. Theologically, we would call that spiritual beings, aliens, demons. And so I think what you have is a theological thing happening here. I don't think this is little green men from bajillions of miles away that have traveled here and just accidentally fallen in New Mexico. I think you have the existence of interdimensional beings, exactly like scripture lays out, that the government is like, guys, we're finding these things. And I think what you have, and I think where we should go is 1 Timothy 4. Because no matter your theory on the rapture and the end times, it seems like there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff that happens at the time of Jesus' return, and that, what happens to the church and where do all these people go, and however you want to read into the end times, there's going to be some weird stuff happening that would scream of, hey, maybe this whole Jesus thing is real, but the world will somehow have to be deceived. And I think you go to 1 Timothy 4. Here's what 1 Timothy 4:1 says. The Spirit clearly says that in the latter times, some will abandon the faith and follow what, my friend? Follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Which I think you could just make the very short leap as to demons being interdimensional beings. So to me, what's happening here and why all of a sudden people are looking at the things that some of the people do in the Epstein files and be like, oh my gosh, that is so unbelievably demonic. And, the worship of Baal and like all of these Nephilim and Genesis chapter 6 stuff that's suddenly like not weird fringy anymore, but right out there in the open. And people are starting to say like, maybe there is some things going on. I think all of those, kind of out there theories about what's happening, in the spiritual, weird, demonic Nephilim thing. I think what you're basically seeing is that scripture is being validated, that yes, there are entities that are interdimensional, clearly in scripture, and there's a disclosure happening in real time to basically deceive people, to make people question reality. And so here's the thing. Think about one of the most famous, maybe the most famous nonfiction radio performance of all times, War of the World, Orson Welles. That was on a radio and convinced people to freak out, let alone now our technology with AI and everything. I think more than going down the rabbit holes of aliens and extraterrestrials and the Epstein files and what's true, what's not, what's up, what's down, is, hey, realize that there's going to be a time, and it's happening now, of deception, of manipulation, and the thing that you can, and the only thing you can that is true is the truth, which is found in the pages of scripture, which is Yeshua, buried, risen from the grave, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is our firm foundation. That is the rock which we stand on. So if you're overwhelmed, our response shouldn't be fear. It should be opening this book, cracking it open, loving every single word of it, and building our life on that, because otherwise we are entering an age of deception, and we need to realize that, Billy.
Absolutely. An age of deception. And, to your point, the demonic realm, are we dealing with demons masquerading as aliens? When you read scripture, it's interesting. Angels are able to, sort of present themselves as human beings sometimes, So when you think about fallen angels, and of course, there's even debate around the nature of what demons actually are. Are they the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, or are they fallen angels? The majority view is fallen angel, but there's a lot there. And, you can get kind of crazy with some of these conversations, but I do think that as Christians, we need to make sure we are well aware of the fact that deception is something that can easily come upon us. And so, when you have a conversation like this happening, we have to be ready with answers. There are some Christians who will leave a door open for, creatures like aliens that they believe God might have created. I think when you look at the biblical framework, I don't see that in there. What I see in there are demons, and we see Satan trying to kill, steal, destroy, and most importantly, confuse. And so I want to be paying attention to that confusion, which I think aliens are going to breed. And I'll say one last thing, and I guess I'll close on kind of a loonier note, a crazier note. But, even people who believe in the rapture, right? I've heard people talk about theories where, well, is the rapture going to be dismissed as some sort of mass alien abduction? Who knows? Not everybody believes in the rapture, but it is an interesting thing to think about. And so my only point is, as believers, we need to be ready with answers. We need to be thinking, and we need to be careful in how we present this to the outside world.